Hey friends, welcome to Latter-day Struggles. This is your host Valerie. So excited to once again be here with you on the Latter-day Struggles podcast, where together we are learning how to become psychologically and spiritually whole through our faith expansion journey here in and around the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you have been hanging out with me on a Monday morning or maybe on another morning each week, you have recently been joined by myself and a good friend of mine, a colleague, Jeff Strong, who is the author of a book that has gotten quite a bit of buzz lately. The book Torn is one that really has garnered a lot of interest because of what he has chosen to tackle. The whole title, I think, is telling, and it speaks to a huge need here in and around the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The book is called this, Torn, Why People Who We Love Are Leaving the Church and What We Can Learn from Them. And I'm a big fan of Jeff. I'm a big fan of his work. I really respect not only the heart of this good man, but also the research that he has done and his attempts to help sort of create some bridges to help more devout people in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints understand what's happening, what's going on here in our community that is in some ways tearing people apart in ways that so many of us feel are very, very unnecessary. So I did three episodes with him, a beautiful series. I have a forthcoming office hours event that my Friday Fellowship is invited to attend. It's a Q&A with Jeff Strong, and that will be also dropped on the Latter-day Struggles podcast as well. And so you can probably see by the attention I'm giving this topic that I care a lot about this, and there's a lot to say. So much, actually, that I decided that even after working with Jeff for the 3 episodes that you just heard on the last 3 Mondays, I wanted to actually give another hour to this topic and specifically to some content in this book. I've been chewing on this for a little while, long before Jeff's book was published. And so when I read his book and spent some time thinking about this and talking to him, I came up with some ideas and some big questions that I had that I was, pondering. I think I found some answers. And so I want to actually share the questions with you and also share my thoughts and what I think might explain some kind of confusing phenomenon going on. So I don't know if you have, been listening or been aware of some of what's been talked about connected to the LDS Church and the state of things. How are we doing? How is the church doing? Because you're going to be hearing 2 very, very different and seemingly even like opposite narratives. The church is thriving. It's doing better than it's ever done before. There's, no problems, nothing to look at over here other than just growth and flourishing on the one hand. And then on the other hand, I think you will hear, we're struggling, that the LDS Church is losing, some of its best and brightest. I think I can say that with a little bit of a, smile on my face because I fancy myself, pretty good and bright. And people like us who love the church, who care a lot about it, who are on a faith expansion journey, and for one reason or another are finding ourselves having spiritual experiences that we would have never, ever anticipated. Some people staying in some way, shape, or form connected to the church, but with a very, very different relationship, and other people feeling compelled to leave, and that this is rapidly increasing. So which one is it? Which one is it? Let me I'm giving you the sort of the broad strokes, but I want to hone in a little bit on these 2 varying narratives, because there have been sort of there's data connected to both of these things that are supposedly kind of concurrent, and I'm going to really be jumping into that today. So in April of 2026, that General Conference weekend, the church news, I was going to say posted, I guess that's true, but they published the following. The headline is, "The Church of Jesus Christ saw 54,000 more convert baptisms last year than the previous record year of 1990. And the article goes on to say the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has grown 66% this century, fueled in part by a record-breaking number of convert baptisms in 2025. The church had 10,752,986 members at the end of 1999. As of 2025 year end, the church has 17,887,212 members, according to an annual statistical report released Saturday, during the church's 196th annual general conference. Okay, so close quote. No, not close quote yet. I'm going to read one more little thing. Latter-day Saint convert baptisms numbered 385,490 in 2025, shattering the old record set in 1990 by 16.51%. Close quote for reals. Now, that's a lot of growth. That's big. That's a record year since 1990. What we will talk about a little bit later on too in this very episode is that there's some research out of BYU that Latter-day Saints are more religious and more practicing in their religion than all of these other Christian faiths in the United States. So there is some reason to believe that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is in fact thriving. Now, okay, what do we do with that other narrative? Are we here to say maybe the other narrative is false? Maybe they're, being dramatic. Maybe they are exaggerating. I don't know. Well, I kind of do know. That's why I'm here to talk about it. But let's just spend some time in those numbers. Now, I am looking specifically at the back of Jeff Strong's book, Torn. If you're a nerd and you love a good graph, this is for you. But I would invite you, since you're going to only be able to sort of listen or watch me, I am going to be referencing the book. It's Appendix B, starting on page 241 of the book, Torn. I'm just going to run through a few. There are more statistics than I'm going to mention here. I just want to kind of create a counterbalance to what you just heard about record baptisms and the church thriving more than ever, because there's this counter narrative going on. A couple of the statistics talk about that there is a growing gap between those in the United States who are formally members of the church and those who are claiming to be members of the church, and that number has been plummeting since 2007. So those on the records are not actually self-identifying as Latter-day Saints more and more and more as the decades pass. Another very interesting statistic is that those that are not claiming membership in the LDS Church are denouncing their membership or not sort of owning their membership more than any other denomination or Christian group in the United States. Let me say that slightly more clearly. Since 2009, the share of U.S. citizens claiming membership in the LDS Church has declined more than any other denomination or group. Okay, so that's another kind of concerning statistic, that people that are on the record that were born in the church really don't consider themselves LDS, independent of what the records say. Let me just give you a couple of more as to offer sort of as this counterbalance. One of the pieces of one of the survey questions had to do with those who were raised as LDS are still affiliated. Okay, so if you were raised in the church as a child, by the time you hit the age of between 18 and 29, do you consider yourself LDS? In 2007, 75% of 18 to 29-year-olds said, yeah, I still am LDS. By 2014, that had dropped to 64%. By 2024, it had dropped to 56%. So in a little less than 20 years, it went from 75 to 56%. This is interesting because those who are raised in the LDS Church who stay as adults are, in general, so that was just what I just shared there was a smaller age demographic. In general, though, if you're just in the entire adult population, how many adults say they're still LDS, okay? So between the 70s and 80s, 77 said, yeah, I was raised as a kid in the LDS Church and I still am. That's a pretty high number. Between the 70s and 80s, 77% of those surveyed still claimed and still said, yep, I'm still in. This dropped a tiny bit to 76% in the 90s. Then it goes down to 58% by the time you hit the year 2000, internet era, right, mid-90s. By the 2010s, it drops to 54%, and then it drops to 38% in the 2020s. So there's a trend here going on, and the trend seems to be picking up speed. Between the 70s and the 2020s, we went from 77 staying in the church in their adult years to 38%. Now, one of the more fascinating statistics that I picked up on has to do with those in the Intermountain states, the disaffiliation that's happening in the Intermountain states. Now, I haven't lived in the Intermountain area for a long time, but I believe we're talking Utah, Idaho, Arizona, that kind of, what is it called? The Jello Belt, I think. I didn't make that up, but I sure wish I had. So in that area, and forgive me I don't think that's too small. There may be another state that I'm forgetting. Maybe, I don't know, maybe one of those other little Intermountain states are included. Maybe Colorado. I don't know. But anyways, be that as it may, their disaffiliation has increased dramatically since the year 2000. It is up, wait for it, 432% since the year 2000. Between 72 and 1999, disaffiliation was at about 5.6%. This is the percentage of people who claimed to be LDS at age 16, but not as adults. This same population, between 2000 and 2016, has jumped to 29.9%. So people in the Intermountain West are dramatically more disaffiliated and disaffiliating than they used to be, up by 432%. And then the last statistic I'll share to sort of offer this interesting second narrative is the percentage of people claiming no religion or becoming one of the nuns. And I don't mean those little ladies with the black habits from The Sound of Music, but the NONES, those who claim no religion. This crowd has grown faster in Utah than in any other state of the United States. So in 2008, that was about 18%. And in 2022, that had jumped up to 38%. And this comes from the Pew Research Center. So what I've done here, I hope, has set the stage as to what's going on. And I legitimately have watched and listened and thought, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Because we keep talking about, anecdotally, I know that there are just so many people experiencing a faith crisis, but then I'm not a statistician. And so this conundrum it was legitimately, I was completely confused by it. And I have to confess that after I studied this, it occurred to me that, oh my goodness, I was being rather simple-minded, right? In other words, I was walking into this situation assuming it had to be one or the other. In other words, there was no possible way that this could be both, right? That it could be both thriving with certain populations of people, but completely thinning. Some populations were thriving, but the church was also thinning out in other ways. And so that's what I wanted to spend some time with you talking about, because Jeff Strong's book, Torn, really actually does a beautiful job of breaking this down, because the answer to the question is, if the question were which one is it, the answer would be both. Meaning that there are record numbers of baptisms, and there is a cohort of people that are thriving in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, while also at the same time, disaffiliation numbers are ramping up exponentially and have done so in the last 20 to 25 years. So let's just talk about what's going on here. And I then want to kind of conclude our time together by talking about why is this happening? And how can we plug this into a stages of faith or a stages of consciousness development paradigm to make better sense of this ourselves? And also perhaps as a way to make better sense of what's going on perhaps in our own homes, in our own friend groups, in our own congregations, or our own immediate or extended families. One thing I want to spend some time talking about is that in the book Torn, Jeff Strong, he talks about how there are three distinct demographics in the LDS Church. Now, I dare say there's probably a lot of different ways to slice this pie, but I think this is a very, very viable one. And for our purposes, I want to stay with his three groups. The first group he's calling the active core. Globally, this comprises 20 to 30% of members of record who actively and consistently participate in church life. These members attend church regularly. They're the ones holding the callings, participating in all the things, in temple worship, in running the show and doing this, the speaking, and they're the ones putting up the chairs, running the nursery. They engage at a high level in personal religious practices at home, also such as prayer and scripture study, family home evening, things like this. This group corresponds closely with the surveys that talk about how the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints brings like more I can't say this word, religiosity than other Christian denominations. The surveys that study this crowd of people consistently show that this group number one, or this active core, has higher levels of religious commitment. They have more frequent church attendance. They're regular scripture studying and praying people. They engage in strong family religious practice, and they have high levels of personal well-being and spiritual peace. That's not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, as I read that, I think to myself that Nathan and I were in this demographic for a very long time. We are creatures of structure and habit, and we did all the things. We actually were practitioners of so many of these things and benefited greatly from them. And so I'm not sad to share that this was who I used to be. In Jeff Strong's study, he references quite frequently a study done by Dyer et al., which is, Dyer is the last name of one of the lead researcher and a team of his researchers or her researchers, and that they document these patterns. But he also points out that these surveys are conducted by these are BYU/LDS endorsed surveys, and so they're mainly filled out by those who actually are in the active core themselves. And so you got to keep in mind that like those filling out, it does matter who's filling out the surveys as far as like what the results are, what you're going to get. These are also compared with members of most of the other more prominent American religious traditions. And when they are compared to other religious traditions, they do show an unusually high level of religious engagement and spiritual practice. So if we're comparing ourselves or this active core cohort, especially with more with Catholic, with evangelical, and with more mainline Christians, which is more of a progressive Christian denomination. I guess I feel kind of weird like comparing them, but that's what they're doing. Is that they do better, they win. So that's core group number one. One of the demographics of the church that sort of is the demographic that the church, when you're listening to a general conference report and they're saying better than ever, we're thriving, record number of. Well, I'm going to speak to the baptism piece here in a second, but the ones who are doing the very best and the ones who really the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints caters to and serves, you might sort of think about them as like their primary audience is this active core. Now, group number two, if you're listening to the Latter-day Struggles podcast, join me in group number two, right? This is the people that have a more complicated relationship with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This group, and I guess what I just said there, I might have been a little bit more overly simplistic, because I am very pleased that the people that I associate with as listeners and as people that I spend a lot of time with in my Latter-day Struggles live, like my growth and processing groups and my life fellowship, which is like a book club style meeting every other week. All of these groups actually comprise people that are anywhere from very active and calling holding to disaffiliated, excommunicated, or less active for many, many years. But we all have something inside of us that is very, Mormon, and that the church is very important in some way to our identity. And this group is the group number two, who were formerly in the core, the Mormon core group, who have in some way, shape, or form changed their relationship with the church and disaffiliated in some way, 10 to 20% of formerly active church members. And so this gets a little bit slippery, because I probably should mention here as I talk about these numbers, I think disaffiliated in this particular study is people that have not that are no longer active. It doesn't mean that you've removed your name from the records of the church, but it means that you are no longer, technically active in the church. So this may feel like you, because of how you are experiencing a complicated relationship with the church, but you may formally be active, and that's perfectly fine. Be that as it may, there are 10 to 20% of people in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that were formerly very, very active. And the research in the Torn book really represents this group as their focus group. So it's a different population of people who are the ones that are really, really wrestling with changing their relationship and sometimes fully disaffiliating with the church in terms of high levels of participation. The work that Jeff did in his work summarizes that nearly 40% of those formerly very active in the church disengaged between the years 2000 and 2024. Somewhere between the numbers 900,000 and 1.2 million formerly active members in the United States. And then, of course, there are more around the world. So what this is saying is that those who were in the active core are becoming part of this second demographic, this group 2. This group is not, this demographic is not largely represented in studies like the one that was done at BYU or by the LDS Church. And oftentimes, the studies that are actually done by the church are only focused on those people in the core group. Number one, those who are thriving, those that are very, very active and quite satisfied in the church. But it does represent a significant part of the church's membership who are experiencing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints very, very differently. Okay, so core group number one is your true blue, your active core. Core group number two is a different demographic that does still comprise 10 to 20% of those whose records are, they have records in the church and they are not actively participating anymore. And this number has increased by roughly 40. Well, this number comprises 40% of formerly active members that had disengaged between 2000 and 2024. I'm emphasizing this because that's a lot of people that used to be very, very active. These are not people that were on the peripheries all of the time, or maybe a 9-year-old convert or even a convert adult who never really engaged in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That would actually be core group number 3. So if group number 1 is the active core, group number 2 is the actively or rapidly growing disaffiliated group, then group number 3 actually is the biggest number of all, which I find really, really interesting. This is members who never fully affiliated, and that comprises 50 to 60% of people on the rolls of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. These are members of record who never really integrated into the church at all. This may include people that were baptized as converts but never became active. You know who they are if you served a mission. They were really excited and you fell in love with them and had a lovely experience, and they came like once after their baptism. And I had a few of those myself, as any of us, and most, if not all of us did, who served a mission and experienced a baptism of a new convert. That's fairly common, especially in some of these nations who historically were baptizing a lot of people very quickly without much of a foundation of what the commitment was or even what the beliefs were. I remember back in the 90s, I would talk to some of the people that I was in the MTC with who were down in South and Central America who were baptizing. I hate to give numbers because it felt so different than what we were doing here in in the United States. But I remember, I want to say like a dozen or 2 dozen people a month sometimes. And one of the gals that I was exchanging letters with, who'd become a friend of mine at the MTC, said that they didn't even necessarily always finish the discussions before they would have these mass baptisms. So it's no wonder that the disaffiliation or the inactivity rate is so high, and that there's a lot of roles that have names of people who really don't call themselves Mormons because they never really were. So that 50 to 60% in this third core, as I mentioned, are converts who never really integrated themselves, or these could be individuals who were baptized as children but never really regularly participated, although they have never removed their names. And so they really aren't part of either the active core or this disaffiliated core of people that used to be very, very active. And so that takes us up to our 100%, 50 to 60% of people that never were really fully affiliated, then 10 to 20% of the group of people that are defecting, that are leaving, and then that leaves you with 20 to 30% of those in the active core. that gives a very different picture of what is going on. And so let's just spend a little bit of time talking about these numbers and how are we coming about such a, kind of a different view of these demographics, and what does this mean? I want to just spend the rest of our time today breaking this down and kind of talking about the both and of this instead of the either or. It is not that the church is either thriving or failing necessarily, but it is that the church in some ways has specialized in one level of psychological development and is seemingly completely confused about what to do about another cohort of people in a different level of development. Okay, so I'm going to spend the rest of our time today actually talking about the core level 1 people, the active core, and the second core group of people, the disaffiliating core, and talk about what is going on there. So first of all, let's just double back a little bit and spend some time talking about stages of faith or stages of consciousness development, and those are very much overlapping. I have moved into talking more about consciousness development, but it's there's overlap, and it's similar enough to where I can kind of interchange those topics or those words, those concepts at least, for today. So think about it this way. Every human being starts at the same level of development, which means every human being needs to begin their development at ground zero with the ability to take the perspective of literally no one. They don't even know what they want, think, or believe. Every human being is born with their fundamental needs, and as an infant, we have no capacity to love because we have no capacity to take the perspective of another. We actually just we function based on impulse. And then as human beings grow, we are able to take upon ourselves the perspectives of more and more human beings. So from infanthood, we move from zero perspective potential to the ability to connect to and relate with our caregiver, and then our family, and then maybe our little group of friends. And as we grow and develop, our capacity to have compassion and take the perspective of others increases as well. So as we grow and develop, every human being needs some sort of structure and some sort of a community to help them feel safety, comfort, and belonging. This is a stage of psychological development. And therefore, as humans grow, it's perfectly normal for them to sort of look around and decide, who are my people? In order to do this, you have to know there's a binary there. This is my circle, and all the people that I understand are inside of this little circle. And then by default, everybody that's outside of this little circle are not my people. They are the other. And so from a developmental perspective, we all work through this stage where there is the in-group, those who belong, those who are that I can make sense of, that I can relate to, and this is my tribe. And whether or not one developmentally, in this developmental level, joins a church or not, they are 100% going to go through a level where they look around and decide who their people are. It just so happens that religious institutions oftentimes are holding spaces for people in that level of development where there is the only way to be, or one's in-group, and this can be, again, it can be a church, but it also can be an ethnicity. It can be one's country. And so when we're developmentally in that stage, we are going to orient ourselves around our community. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you could say, specializes in people at that level of consciousness, spiritual, or psychological development. The prime directive in this level of development is attachment. It is feeling like I belong and I'm going to be safe because I belong in this community. You make sense to me. You keep me safe. I help keep you safe. We work together. We know what the rules and roles are. And everyone, is sort of going to be okay because we can make sense of the world. And then we also sometimes strengthen that with the narrative of what happens or what's going on outside of that circle that is scary and unknown, and that kind of keeps us very, very bonded together, because there becomes sort of a safety in here, danger out there. And attachment is the prime directive, as I mentioned. Okay, so from this paradigm, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints takes care of and does a, conceivably, arguably good job. That 10 to 20% of people, the 20 to 30% of that core group of which I used to belong, to which I used to belong, they served me well until, of course, they didn't. And it was time for me to evolve and develop. That's when we move into core group number 2. So core group number 2 is the human being that has worked through or experienced important developmental passages that have to do with meeting these attachment needs. And then for a period of time, the human being moves into a phase where their prime directive inside of their soul is actually less about attachment and more about differentiation of self. This is where I am no longer most interested in belonging to the group, but I become most interested in belonging to myself. I'm less interested in obeying an external authority, and I'm more interested in learning about the sacred divine within myself. And so my developmental work at this point in my life shifts from belonging out to those out there to belonging to who I truly am right inside of myself. I'm not here to say that there's one or the other of these that is like the most important. I'm actually preparing you to hear that both of these are important. We start with attachment, and then the hope is that we have enough attachment security to move into differentiation. And as we healthily differentiate, then we move into integration, which is the integration of attachment and differentiation, where we have a healthy relationship with ourselves such that we are able to be in healthy connection with others. So this core group 2, this 20 to 30% of those in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who are wrestling with their relationship with the church, many of whom are disaffiliating because they are doing something profoundly important, sacred, good, and normal, and their church system doesn't understand. So many of the people that were interviewed in the research that Strong did for the book Torn shared that a great deal of their grief had to do with their own internal sacred experience being mistrusted, or they're being judged by the people around them. So many of these folks seemed to have very complex relationships with the church and were changing in their foundational beliefs about God and many other really crucial parts of their spirituality. But many of them wanted to still be deeply connected to their community and their loved ones, because of course we do, right? That's such an important part of who we are. And they were left feeling as if they didn't belong and were not welcome. So my conclusion is that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints focuses on this early developmental stage, this attachment stage of human growth and development. And the unfortunate thing is that it is my belief that the LDS Church, not having a working knowledge of stages of human growth and development, thinks that the attachment stage is the whole thing. They think that it is, they don't realize there's an arc of development that ends in integration. They think that attachment is the beginning, middle, and end. It's not only not a differentiation church, it doesn't even acknowledge that differentiation is a part of the arc of development at all. This actually speaks to both of these phenomenon around where the church is thriving. It thrives amongst those that are in this attachment stage of development. And it also is thriving. You'll remember that this was a record year of baptisms. That's not altogether surprising if you remember that every human being starts at ground zero and has to work through this attachment part of their development. And so there will always be churches that are all about tribalism, that claim to be the one true church. And the LDS Church, incidentally, is not the only one that does this. It's a developmentally normal thing for a church to do. And so there will always be churches like that, because there will always be people in that earlier, an appropriate stage of development for them, where they want to belong to something so that they can form their earlier identities and feel as if those early developmental needs are being met by these communities that help them feel what it feels like to be to belong, and those attachment needs are met. And I can vouch for this firsthand because we have a son on a mission. I'm recording this in middle of 2026, and my son has. If you are thinking about success from the perspective of, traditional success on a Mormon mission with regards to baptisms, he's done remarkably well because based on where he's serving and the demographics of the people in his particular areas where he's served, he very much is speaking to an audience that is primed for and needs and wants this kind of attachment or this kind of nurturing. They want connection. They want community. A lot of people that he's worked with have fraught lives, have lived in a lot of chaos and instability. And for that demographic, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a safe haven. I will also say that as I have worked with many people who are converts to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that I work with now who are in a faith crisis, we talk about their origin stories. We talk about how they came to the church and what was going on in their lives that made the church feel so safe and like such a blessing to them. And almost without fail, the people that I have worked with came from very fraught backgrounds, alcoholic parents, a lot of chaos, a lot of poverty and instability, and who wouldn't be just absolutely dazzled by going into like a United States secure Mormon ward on a Sunday morning where a child of, a fragile child that is coming from a great deal of abuse and instability doesn't walk in and go, gosh, sign me up here. This looks great. And it does look great. And for so many people, for a period of time, it serves. And the beautiful thing is, if you look at it from this wide perspective that I'm trying to put out into the Mormon discourse, it's a beautiful thing because it gives that person the comfort, safety, and belonging that they need to have the developmental experiences that they deserve so that they can move beyond that part of their development and into a readiness for deeper soul growth, which moves them into a differentiation relationship. All right, so what I'm trying to talk about here is that this core group one is this earlier stage of development where people are trying to achieve the developmental needs of attachment. This is what the church is talking about when they're talking about record numbers of baptisms, when they're talking about this core group that when you compare to all other Christian groups, they're better. And the LDS Church does provide that structure. As a matter of fact, I know this has been quoted a few times, but it's worth repeating. Richard Rohr has often been noted to have said that the Mormon Church is maybe one of the best churches one can join for first half of life, to get those first half of life needs met. Now, the core group number 2 is moving into differentiation. This is the crowd who want or long for connection, because we always do. But again, in a developmental pocket of our lives, the most important thing moves away from belonging to the crowd, and it moves towards belonging to oneself, belonging to one's soul, finding God within. And this is the group that is finding themselves homeless. And so this is the group that when you heard me sharing those numbers that I shared from Jeff's book about the wave of disaffiliation that is sweeping at least the United States, if not the world, or at least parts of the world, this is us. We're finding ourselves homeless simply because there is a profound lack of understanding about the arc of development within the spiritual, divine human soul. And this cohort of people is growing. And I must say, as I close today, that is in some twisted backwards way a compliment to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I know that sounds really funny, but think about it this way. Each and every one of us that has awakened to a potential to be more critically thinking, each of us who has awakened to the capacity to challenge that which doesn't feel right, each of us that has had the courage to go, I don't think that's congruent, or that doesn't feel like it's consistent with the depths of my spiritual being, that human being has had enough experiences to evoke in them the capacity to grow from needing attachment towards needing or wanting or being ready for a relationship that is more focused on differentiation. Now, the hope is, of course, that we'll all be able to move through the trajectory of faith development, and that our communities will support us. What Jeff's book is trying to communicate is that there could be ways that, at least from the bottom up, our spiritual home in the wards and in our homes and families, at very least, could become a little bit more supportive of those of us who are in that core group number 2. Those of us who are having a more complex relationship with God and the faith. But that doesn't mean that we don't want attachment also, because keep in mind, even if one moves from an exclusive preference for attachment towards the spiritual work done in the differentiation phase of our faith development, that does not mean that we don't want to be in connection with others. What we all long for and desire as divine beings is connection. And the hope is that we move from exclusive attachment, and sometimes that swings over to exclusive differentiation. But the hope is that we eventually are able to move into integration, which is a differentiated soul that is accepted in relationships of connection. So it's basically the marriage of attachment, and differentiation is integration. So that, my friends, is what we can think about when we look at the two different narratives. Why is it that the church can both be thriving and also concurrently thinning? And the reason why is because human beings grow and inhabit different stages of development, and church systems specialize in certain stages of development. Our church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is a specialist in early stage faith. They are a specialist in the tribalism that comes from that part of our development where we are most interested in the comfort, safety, and belonging of community, and of feeling secure in being sort of God's favorite. And again, I don't say that disrespectfully, because every human being wants this and passes through or sometimes stays at that stage for their whole lives. And also, some human beings on an equally spiritual journey move beyond that stage of development, and that explains the second narrative, which is the narrative that is deeply analyzed in the book Torn: Why People We Love Are Leaving the Church and What We Can Learn from Them. My hope is that these short conversations that I'm sharing with you can help you make better sense not only of your beautiful, unique faith journey, but can also help you better understand and have more compassion for your loved ones that are in a different place on the faith expansion journey. I am absolutely committed to, and even maybe obsessed with, this concept of transcendence and inclusion. This episode, and I hope every episode that I share with you, I want to be modeling that while we may transcend some of the ideas of our early stage faith, of our more devout days, we can include the core truths or the core ideas about love and service that we learned in primary, but we can reclaim them on our own terms based on who we are becoming as more and more spiritually evolved beings, and that we can also include the necessity that every human being walks their own walk through these stages of development in their own time, and we can make space for that. And I hope that will decrease the polarization that we see ourselves experiencing here in and around the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I hope this helped. I hope you benefit from what we're learning from these great researchers that are trying to help us understand our own community. And I appreciate all of the support that you have given me as I have given you and committed to you so much of myself as we walk this walk together. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Latter-day Struggles. If this podcast has supported your faith journey, we invite you to explore the many ways you can continue your healing and growth with us. On our website, you'll find support and processing groups, marriage and parenting courses, and free resources to support where you are in your faith journey. You can also join Valerie in the live fellowship gatherings throughout the year, where we connect, process the podcast, and build meaningful friendships with others on similar paths. If cost has ever been a barrier, we offer podcast scholarships funded by listener donations. To explore all of these offerings, visit the link in today's show notes or go to latterdaystruggles.com. And if this podcast has been meaningful to you, leaving a 5-star review is one of the most powerful ways to help others find this work. Latter-day Struggles is proud to be part of the Dialogue Podcast Network.
Dialogue Podcast Network.